Hey there, everybody. This is a fan with too much time, and today we're gonna go ahead and get into the Q&As. But before I do that, I wanted to just say two things. First of all, I'm gonna talk about that big news a little later on, so stay on for that. But more than that, I was what was it? Oh, right. I'm going to address a comment, a critique, if you will, that was made by the aptly named Shameless Critique. And I'll go ahead and read it all out. Because he made a comment here, and I just see other people responding in my place, and I'm just going to go ahead and nip this in the bud right now. So, let me just pull this comment up, and I'll read his initial comment, my response, his responses, and I'll just go ahead and respond to everything as I go along. So let's take a look. Alright, here we go. I am really digging this. Big but, however. This guy is spending way too much time on Star Wars, I guess I'm this guy, is spending way too much time on Star Wars characters and their side of the story. We've basically got all the hero units and main franchise characters going up against 40k nobodies. Ouch. And it seems to smack of bias and favoritism. Where the fuck are the famous 40k characters or even, basic mainstream chapters? So far I'm getting disposable red shirt vibes. Okay, so let me address that. And I respond with, right beneath I put, LOL, you will be surprised. And let me go ahead and say this. While I will admit that any characters I make up will implicitly have less plot armor than any characters that are mainline, like protected characters from either franchise, but mostly from Star Wars, while that will be the case, I don't take that to mean that they're lower quality or less main or anything. In fact, I kind of think that it's harder to use Star Wars characters that are mainline characters in a compelling way because you guys kind of know that I can't get rid of them until certain things happen. Like I could just veer off and not have anything happen in Star Wars that would have happened otherwise. But I do believe in like the concept of fate and of things like coming around, and frankly I think I would be wasting a lot of opportunities if I didn't get around to showing you guys, Vader versus Space Marines and things like that. And we can't show you, or I can't show you Vader if Anakin dies. You see what I'm saying? Not only that, but it's just I understand the desire to move all the grimdark in 40k into Star Wars without making any allowance for the fantasy aspect of Star Wars to move into 40k. But that's not exactly fair. Yes, there will be incredibly grimdark things that happen, and you guys have experienced that. You saw how with Star Wars characters you have horror movie moments. But there will also be Star Wars things that happen, things that are much less grimdark and much more in the realm of like fantasy and standard hero's journey sci-fi, which is much more the realm of Star Wars. It's only fair, and it is the point of mixing these two universes. In previous discussions, I think I've talked about how it isn't my intention to write a narrative or a version of this story that is just a wash for one side or isn't interesting and it doesn't have a lot of like mix and cool stuff that ends up happening between the factions and stuff. So if you're looking for just a wash, I'm not really making that, and you won't get that from me. If you're not, then well, that is what it is. So when you say that you see a bunch of 40k nobodies, Orion isn't a nobody. The Crimson Razors aren't less powerful than a mainline chapter, at least of like standard strength. Actually, no. The Crimson Razors are actually a bit more powerful than your standard chapter because just like the Black Templars, they have stopped obeying Codex, and that includes like with restrictions to their recruitment. But more to the point, though, is just that don't take my homebrew or things that I put in that aren't necessarily established famous characters from 40K to be nobodies. Instead, take their positions to be much more what they are. A chapter master isn't a nobody no matter who it is, or at least they shouldn't be if they're written right. And trust me when I say this, I love Warhammer 40K. Part of the reason why I give Warhammer 40K pushback and have allowance for Star Wars is because I can't even show the coolest stuff that happens in Warhammer if I don't put people in a hearse. You see what I'm saying? So trust me, I love Warhammer. I honestly, and it's just kind of hard because I don't want to ever have to choose between the two, but right now, currently, especially as I wait for more Star Wars stuff to come out, I enjoy Warhammer more and enjoy more Warhammer media currently than I enjoy Star Wars media. So take that for what you will. So let's move down. You say, okay, 21 episodes in and up to date. I'm still getting disposable red shirt vibes from the 40K side. Meanwhile, we got Star Wars hero characters with major plot armor surviving certain death, being spared and conveniently being taken prisoner, etc. Okay. I don't really, I wish that you could give me more examples of, well, let's see if you go into examples down here. Yeah. So let's see here. Ahsoka should be dead or left for dead and severely wounded. Okay, she was left for dead and severely wounded. I mean, he did, okay. He didn't, apply medical treatment to her. That is to say, the tech priest. So, she was... I think I conveyed that she was found in really rough condition. He gave her a jolt to restart her heart and to keep things moving. But it's not like she was okay or fine or anything. She's really messed up. She's got a broken leg, broken arm. She's bruised and beat up even after having had lots of Bacta applied. And, Bacta is like that fantasy sci-fi heal-all, cure-all material. So you may not like it, but that's just the canon. Now, let me see here. Left for dead, severely wounded. Instead, she's not only spared, but literally saved by a fanatical enemy because his extremism was blunted or mellowed. No. If you think that his extremism was blunted or mellowed, then you're not actually understanding what I did there, or what I tried to do, rather. It is because of his extremism. It's because of his religion that he ended up doing what he did. You see, there has never been an instance of the Mechanicus encountering a Xenos species that already worships any derivative of the motive force or of the machine god or of anything like that. It's also extremely unusual for them to encounter species that seem so human. The Eldar and even the Tau are remarked as being unusual in how humans can be in any kind of proximity to them and how they can look like humanish. And if you look at the other aliens in the Warhammer 40K galaxy, you quickly find that this is the case, that most aliens are at best bipedal humanoid, but, are pretty gruesome and definitely not human. So what he thinks he's seeing here is basically the motive force manifesting naturally here. And he may not have a full decision of what he wants to do about it, but he's definitely not going to just kill the first motive force faithful alien that he encounters, especially when they're so directly tied into things here. He doesn't understand everything that it may or may not be going on, but he is so faithful and has so much faith in the motive force that he's willing to allow it to continue its work. And that's what you see there. So he's not mellowed. His extremism is not blunted. And if you get that, you're really you're misunderstanding me. It's specifically because of that he's willing to take that kind of risk with a Xeno. And honestly, it wouldn't even be a normal tech priest that does this. It would have to be someone as fanatical and as extreme as a Fulgurite Electro priest, which is why I made it that way. So, let me see here. Let me just read the rest of your comment here. Blunted or mellowed by a 5-minute conversation, most of which we didn't really get to hear. Really, dude? Well, you know, again, not blunted, not mellowed. And the part of the conversation you did hear, the snippet that I did give you, had the key pieces, the key ingredients that would help you to understand why he made those connections. So what you didn't hear was him just explaining what you as a 40K fan already know he is saying. And it's mostly just Ahsoka responding in more or less the way you saw before, with like a cautious respect as she tries to get more and more out of him. But that's about it. So really, dude, well, really what I just said, yes, you know, and, yeah, in any case, moving on from that, you got the Inquisitor with the pet demon letting the sexy non-character Jedi, who seemingly only exists for deviant art and porn parodies, get away instead of suffering the horrific 40K fate of horrendous torture and death. Okay, so, you know, Aayla Secura is not a nobody non-character Jedi. You know, I get that she's not Obi-Wan Kenobi, Mace Windu, or Yoda, and she's definitely not Anakin Skywalker, but just because she's not one of those characters does not mean that she's a nobody Jedi. You know, she has history in the lore, in the books, in the comics, and I'm not obliged to ignore all of that, you know? Not only that, but say what you will, Aayla Secura is, you know, one of the youngest Jedi Masters. She was an apprentice to Quinlan Vos, who Quinlan Vos, in addition to being one of the very few Jedi who knows like the skill of technometry, he's also a Jedi who learned the pad. So her being his direct apprentice by itself is a pretty significant thing. That's not even then throwing in all the breadth of experience that she's had to even get to the point where the Jedi Council was willing to award her, you know, a seat as a master, basically, at her relatively young age. Aayla Secura has done a lot, and it's not fair to say those things. They're just not true. Like, when you say the sexy non-character Jedi who seemingly only exists for deviant art and porn parodies get away, like that just now, what am I supposed to do with that? You know, you're insulting this character, denigrating this character, but it's not adhering to any kind of truth when you say it. So I guess I can't take that seriously. Get away instead of suffering the horrific 40K fate of horrendous death and torture. Okay, so what you're saying is that you wanted Aayla Secura to be tortured and have a horrendous death, which may still happen at some point in the future. But you're upset that you didn't get it now, and you're critiquing that I allowed that to happen. Now, what I would tell you is that that whole scene, that whole thing, was a huge homage to not only like the Gendry Cherkovsky Grievous scene, where clone commandos come in with their gunship to pull the Jedi, actually to pull Aayla Secura and other Jedi out of a near-death experience with General Grievous, where they all barely survive. That was an homage to that. In addition to that, it was also a reference to how the dynamic between Jedi and clones tends to work, where Jedi seem to job a lot of the actual battlefield like objectives, but then get into trouble and then require the clones to pull them out. You'll notice that at the start of that whole story, Aayla had a comm pin in her vest, and that later when she encounters the Inquisitor, she grabs onto her vest over her heart and is squeezing her hand over and over again. That is not just an innocuous detail. From the very moment that he begins his monologue, she is pinging the clones and trying to get help from them. And of course, the clones are rarely pinned by Aayla. Aayla is a pretty competent combatant and is usually pretty close to them. And in addition to that, she's pinging them over and over and over because she's, of course, horrified by everything she's hearing and seeing. So they come running. Not only do they come running, they call in reinforcements from the Vanguard, all of whom end up dying. I don't think that that's so far out of the range of things that could even happen in Warhammer 40K that you can accurately critique me for it. There's no rule that demands that Aayla Secura die the very first time she encounter an Inquisitor. There's no rule that demands that this swing the way you just did. And then you say, because she's obviously really important to the Star Wars franchise. Well, I mean, does she need to be absolutely vital to survive even a single encounter with the Imperium? I mean, I would personally like to keep using Aayla for maybe a few other things. I would like to make that homage to Gendry Tartakovsky, and I can't really do that if the Jedi dies, you know. Ki-Adi-Mundi is already dead, and he was the previous survivor of that encounter that came out conscious. I can't use him. You know, cut me some slack here, man. That's not really a fair thing to say, because there really is no rule that says that she has to die at that given moment. The situation was in a context, and I believe in that context, given both universes and given the things that I put there, it makes plenty of sense. And I don't think that you've pointed out anything that demands that I change that or that my quality would increase from changing that. Which, of course, is generally the purpose of a critique. So let's go down. You got the Sister of Silence sparing Anakin Skywalker instead of ironically choking him to death or just cutting his head off. Because the sisters are known for being really merciful and chatty, you know, never missing an opportunity to interrogate a witch. Well, this sister is basically, you know, working with an Inquisitor, and I'm not trying to give away too much, but this sister is working with an Inquisitor and is working to hold this specific other prisoner hostage while that Inquisitor questions him. And she encounters this psyker spy that apparently came all the way down here to try to free this guy. Now, she had a choice to make. The Sisters of Silence don't work for the Inquisition. If an Inquisitor goes up to a Sister of Silence and gives her a direct order, she doesn't actually have to obey him. She would probably end up paying out the ass for not doing so in some way or capitulating to the authority of the Inquisition in some way, but technically speaking, the sisters, while they're not as immune to inquisitorial authority as, like, let's say, Space Marines, when they do work with Inquisitors, it's typically in exchange for a favor. The Sisters of Silence play nice with the Inquisition and don't struggle against them politically because they exchange favors with each other. And I think that that's a pretty reasonable conclusion to draw from very many instances in the lore that we see this. And this is why most Inquisitors don't go, you know, waving their dicks around the Sisters of Battle or the Sisters of Silence and just trying to act like they're the boss. It doesn't usually pay out for them. They're too willful. So she's working for an Inquisitor. All this to say that she's working for an Inquisitor to get something from the Inquisition to increase their standing, or, you know, you see what I'm saying here. So this spy comes in. He's really weak. She defeats him very, very quickly. She can execute him, but she isn't obliged to do so. If she does, she, who is calm, who is cool, who is collected, who has not been pushed anywhere near her limit by this man, is going to know that if she turns a corpse over to the Inquisitor, he's going to say, "This is the spy who got all the way into the prison, and you just killed him. Why did you do that?" She knows he's going to say that. That is a very obvious thing for an Inquisitor whose key thing is interrogating and finding out information from people to say. So what does she do? She ingratiates herself, or moves for an ingratiation, by simply not killing him. Now, normally, she may not do this. Normally, even for an Inquisitor, this may not be done. But there are two things that are really to keep in mind here. One, the guy she just incapacitated was extremely easy to handle for her. And two, there's a big one, really big, okay? She's right next to an interrogation chamber with equipment to restrain psychers. Now, I'm not saying that every sister would do this, but I am saying that when you phrase this as being so incredibly unbelievable or unreasonable to the point of it needing to be critiqued, it comes off to me as unreasonable. You know, let me see here. Yeah, that was the whole length of that comment there. I don't think that it's unreasonable for a Sister of Silence standing in that context, having knocked this guy unconscious, to just lock him up and let the Inquisition deal with him, especially standing next to that room. I don't think it's unreasonable. No one's expecting R2-D2 to be there. They're not used to dealing with an AI faction that are like them. The AI faction that the Imperium is used to dealing with is like the Tau, who don't let their AI wander around, typically unsupervised, and, you know, the Necron, who don't look anything like droids typically do, especially not astromechs. So that's really like the loose end there, not her tying up Anakin Skywalker. We know Anakin Skywalker has plot armor. Please don't sweat me so hard over that. This situation is one where it could have been any Jedi, and she would have still incapacitated him and locked him up. I try not to make the plot armor stick out so hard. It's not so crazy to say she would have done that. No, obviously, man, she's not going to chat him up herself. There's the presence of an Inquisitor. There's the expectation of an interrogation. I do expect my reader to put those things together, you know, respectfully. So moving down from that. Look, I get why you would set your fan fiction in the time and place and the way you have. If you hadn't handicapped the 40K and the Imperium side, it wouldn't be very interesting, and it would be just a depressing slaughter. If you'd set it in the era of the original trilogy, there'd be like maybe three, maybe four Force users, and the rest would just be the Empire versus Imperium, etc. That said, the major problems or criticisms I have with your story are incredibly subjective and personal. Has very little to do with your actual skill or talent in storytelling. I appreciate you saying that. I wish that you had said that earlier. You know, it does a lot for me reading this and being the guy who made the stuff, and therefore taking it personally and having to divorce myself very intentionally from your statements. It would do a lot for me if you prefaced everything that I had just read with what you just said. I appreciate it, though. I really do. First and most importantly, I don't like how you're conflating the warp and the Force and basically saying that they're the exact same thing. Just doesn't sit right. So I've made a pretty big case as to why I believe that they're basically the same thing, that they can be treated very similarly. And if you like, you can go. I don't feel like having to reiterate all of those things, in large part because you just, you know, to back up your point and to make the case for your critique, what you say is just doesn't sit right. You know, it doesn't feel respectful for you to say that you're issuing a critique and to put forward as much effort as you have writing out these things, but then when it comes to justifying or backing up or putting substance behind the criticism, it amounts to just doesn't sit right. Whoa. Would it be too much if I asked why? You know, I mean, why do I have to ask why? You know, you should back up your point when you say it. I don't think it's unreasonable for me to ask that you do that, because otherwise it leaves me with very little to say in return, aside from all the things that I've said in my previous videos that are the similarities between the Force and the Warp. And of course, in the expanded universe, the Force and the Warp are almost identical in many ways, except with the Force being much mellower and chilled out. But yeah, moving on from that. Second, I never liked a lot of the extended lore or expansions to the Star Wars universe. The Chosen One bullshit, the prophecy, the introduction of the Sith and their ideology. The Jedi going from mysterious, mythical, legendary warriors akin to being space knights or samurai, turning out to be creepy, short-sighted weirdo Vulcans from Star Trek, especially religious or ESC religious monks, is entangled in a web of bureaucracy and politics, etc. So the more you go into or really on that shit, and it is shit in my opinion, the less I'm enjoying it. Okay, so what you just described is not the expanded universe or the extended lore. What you just described is mainline lore that has been depicted in the movies. So what you're trying to tell me is that I should have just played it in the original 3 movies, episode 4, 5, and 6. And that's not really your call to make. You know, you're now, again, and you did preface this by saying it's subjective and personal. That's part of the reason why when I respond to you, my initial short response in my comment was, well, I suppose we will just have to agree to disagree. What could I possibly say to what you just said? Because what you just said feels extremely unreasonable. You're basically just saying that you personally don't like anything besides episode 4, 5, and 6, and maybe 7, 8, and 9. But even saying that should sound like a weird contradiction to you. Episode 4, 5, and 6. It's incomplete. You need 1, 2, and 3. I could more easily sympathize with the perspective of I don't like the EU, the expanded universe, because I've only watched the movies. I loved the movies. That's where I base my Star Wars fandom out of, and that's what I'd like you to respect. And seeing you veer away from that is uncomfortable for me. I have sympathy for that. You know? A lot of fans exist that are that way. But what you're describing here isn't quite that way. What you're describing to me, what it seems you're describing to me at least, is that I should just stick to those original 3 movies, which was never the intention. It was never the intention that those movies exist in a vacuum. It was never the intention that those movies be the only things that happen. There's a reason that Lucas went to 1, 2, and 3 after he finished those instead of moving forward. Because honestly, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 could have been finished. 7, 8, and 9 are the things that are extraneous and added on to the end. But you don't have to go out that far. But you did have to go back and tell 1, 2, and 3 because 4, 5, and 6 can't exist without them. So all I'm saying is that you're asking that I exclude that based off of your preference alone, but not based off of not based on any respect for the story George Lucas was telling, not for any respect of what a lot of people are fans of, including myself, not out of respect for chronology or for what is canonically lore, not expanded lore, not Disney lore, not Lucas lore, but just plain old spine lore. Like, you know, I understand that you have gripes about what George Lucas did with his lore and that you didn't like that when the mystery box came up, they weren't as space knight or samurai as much as they were religious Vulcan monks and politicians. You know, that's a good critique to have of Star Wars that you can have, and that I don't want to impugn or in any way. That's not really a thing that I have a lot to do with, is what I'm trying to say. That's just how Star Wars is, and I can't dismiss those things based on the case you've made, which is basically a case that it is just personal. I get that you're going to enjoy it less because you have this personal opinion. I get that in your personal opinion, this is shit. There's nothing that I can do for that, man. This is not shit to me. I like this. I liked the politics in episodes 1, 2, and 3. I liked that the Jedi were playing this game and that they turned out to be that way because they have to fall. I don't like the idea of the Jedi having been proper mystical good space monks and knights who are doing the right things and being correct, and them having been defeated and destroyed anyway. That's not a good message to send, you know. I like the idea that they brought about their own downfall. It's poetic, it's realistic, it rhymes for me. It doesn't undo the samurai or the space knight aesthetic for me. It actually just pushes it back further. You know, if you want to have gripes about something, have gripes about the High Republic. Which I'm not really looking at right now a lot. I'm just waiting to see if anything interesting comes out for people to nudge me in that direction, but right now, that's what it feels like for me. In any case, I can't do a lot about that. All the things you just said, I'm not obliged to take that into hard consideration because you're asking me to lobotomize too much of what I take to be canonical Star Wars, and I hope that you can respect that, because I don't think I've ever given off the impression that it would be any other way. So, Let me go down here. Third and final. Okay. Third, my final and only real objective complaint is you might be spinning too many plates and jumping back and forth too often. You know what? I can kind of agree with that. I've never written a story out this long, or anything really like that. Anything really. So, it is definitely the case that I may be telling too many parts, because my whole idea with the Battle of Axum was to tell the whole story of this battle, at least as much as I could stand to do it. And now I'm beginning to pull things in. Even with Sando, Sando is standing where Aayla Secura cannot right now, to keep you guys in that battlefront. You'd have to be there with somebody, one way or the other, and she's just not going to be there, so it has to be someone new. But everything is now coming down, and I'm even pulled away. I had planned to do much more with the Jedi battling the forces of the Imperium at the bunker, but frankly, I don't have a lot to do in that place, and I don't have a lot of time to spare for them because of how it's going to go with thousands of Jedi descending on a sabotaged Imperial force that is being handicapped by a rogue Inquisitor. The conclusion is more or less forgone, and I think that you guys know that. I can't spend too much time on that unless cool, interesting crap is going to happen. But yeah, insofar as I may be spinning too many plates, yeah, and lessons are definitely being learned. But I'll say this: the plates are being put down, like as you're watching, they're being put down slowly, piece by piece. So, moving on from that. Though your timing for suspense is great, you're consistently making me say, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen next. Oh, thank you. The constant cliffhanger bait and the amount of characters, locations, and scenarios you're shuffling between has me saying, wait, where are we now again? Oh, it's this thing from 3 videos ago, and I'm having trouble still giving a shit because I'm still hung up on your last cliffhanger. It's killing the pacing and focus of your story, dude. Yeah, and, I am in the process of trying to correct that and narrow it down. Also that dun 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 tune in the next week to find out what happens next trick, when overused, leads to audience apathy. They either end up waiting so long for something to happen that they stop caring, or the conclusion and climax doesn't meet the expectations built by the drawn out suspense. I plan to land these landings. I plan to make these things land correctly. That's part of the reason why it's so long. Once I threw these anchors out, I have had the strong temptation to pull everything in artificially and in a way that is very tight to pull it in just a few videos. But I realized that by doing that, I will really just complete a somersault onto my face. I started all these stories. I put them all out there. I need to finish them properly. If I pull them all in too fast or jerk them in too quickly, I'm not even going to give you guys the little bit of dividends you would get for having gone this route. I'm not going to shortchange that. I'm going to bring it all in properly, but it requires that it be long, basically. I hope that you guys will find my landings to be good. You just saw one of them. Not necessarily the end of the landing with 1313. You guys will come back with him. But with Lazarus, more or less, you've seen now from beginning to end the assault on the bridge platform. And I'm hoping that you were satisfied by what you see here and by what you see may grow out from here, because of course no end is a true end and no beginning comes from nothing. So I'm hoping that works out, but yeah, I get what you're saying insofar as some things. I always aim to end on some kind of cliffhanger. I don't necessarily design my story to create them artificially, but I do aim to try to end my videos on them. And the reason for that should be obvious. You always want to have something that brings the audience or the reader back. When I write this down as chapters, I always try to end my chapter with a cliffhanger, just so that when you put the story down on this chapter, you have a little kick to remind you to come back for the next chapter. So that's just my philosophy of writing, and that would be, my response to that. Now, at the time, I said, well, I suppose we'll just have to agree to disagree. And that's because I encountered all of your subjective questions first, which I honestly would encourage you to lead first with your objective questions, because I can actually get into those. And I would also ask that you preface your subjective questions with an acknowledgement of that subjective nature, it helps them go down a lot easier. Because, again, then the reason I responded initially to you was, well, I suppose we will just have to agree to disagree, is because I could really only say that to so many of the things and the problems that you had, you know? Your issue with Ayla, your issue with Ahsoka, your issue with Anakin. I really just, I'm not willing to change what I'm doing because of the things that you said there. And your issue with the lore, again, I can agree to disagree. That's the best I can do for you in regards to those things. And for the reasons I've already said why. Then somebody else comes in here, gets offended for me, makes me a little concerned. I get down. You respond to them. I'm not really going to respond to that, but you do respond to me again. So I say, I'll respond to you personally in my next after talk. I'd rather speak clearly on the stuff mentioned here than have others extrapolate or answer on my behalf. I will say this. You do come off as less than civil in your critique, and I do find that most of your comments are based out of your opinion and not actual critical analysis of my writing. There is little I can do about your dislike for the Sith or the EU, but like I said, I will address that point. I will address that point for point, so that nothing gets twisted. Still, I must say that this at the onset, a lot of what you put into this does not read like constructive criticism. I still maintain that, whether that was your intention or not. So here we go forward. And then you respond to me, you say, civil means different things to different people, I guess. I don't recall insulting or demeaning anyone. Well, you did insult and demean Aayla Secura. You did insult and demean the way that I had handled, you know, the story with Anakin and Ahsoka's survival. You know, you did use vulgarity and stuff like that. And that does typically imply an insult or demeaning nature of some kind. Typically, and you used it repeatedly. But you did do that. So in any case, if someone doesn't like my tone or vocabulary, there's very little I can do about it. I can see what you did there. And I don't feel the need to change who I am or how I think and feel. I'm not asking you to do any of that. But let me say this. And I noticed that in your initial comment, you weren't really addressing me. You were addressing the audience and addressing me as a subject. If you really are trying to have a critique and then a back and forth with the author, first, you know, do speak as though I'm in the room, because I am. But aside from that, know that if you are trying to have me respond to you and engage you in a longer back and forth and not just turn off, it does behoove you, and you are not obligated, but incentivized to speak with common civility, which is a lack of vulgarity, a lack of typically insulting verbology. I know that there isn't not very little you can do about it. You can, you know, you have control of the way that you write. I would be more sympathetic if we were speaking person to person, because people have a way of speaking, and speaking is a thing that is done moment by moment, instant by instant, instinct by instinct. But you're writing. You can write civilly. I have faith that you have that skill. You certainly are not illiterate. You definitely have the capacity to express thoughts here. So if you were to put that as a priority, I know that you could accomplish it. If you don't try to enforce into yourself when you have these discussions some form of civility, you don't encourage the person to be civil in return, and you don't encourage the person to even respond back. I'm not obligated to respond back to you. I'm doing this mostly because I saw kind of the response it had, and also I would like to, in responding to you, respond to many who may be like you, and just have this out on the record. But because of that, in the future, people who respond or do some of the things that you did, respond in the ways that you did, I likely won't waste a lot of time on them. I don't want to indulge or reward negativity or being shitty. Not to say that you're like a shitty person. I'm just saying that I kind of feel shitty at the end of reading your comment, and if that's the effect that your comment has, whether it was your intention or not, I'm not incentivized to to respond to it or engage with it. In fact, I'm incentivized to do the opposite. And that's just common human behavior that both of us should recognize as being a thing that exists. And that's it, you know. So let's see here. I will say that if my bluntness, vulgarity, or crude sense of humor and general demeanor came off as insulting, rude, or disrespectful, well, I apologize, as it wasn't intended to be. I appreciate that. Like I said, I admit that most of this stuff is my subjective personal opinion. However, I think you'd be severely mistaken in assuming I'm entirely unique, or that I don't think that. That's actually, I'm not assuming that. That's actually why I'm having, like, you know, an after talk where the first thing I do is go point by point and address what you're saying. I don't assume that you're unique. I don't mean to isolate you or denigrate you. That isn't in any way what I've done or try to do here. So you say, I think you'd be severely mistaken in assuming I'm entirely unique, or that I'm far out here, out there on some extreme in my opinions. And again, I don't think that, and I don't mean to have given you that impression. The EU is a vast labyrinth collection of mostly obscure, irrelevant, quote-unquote information that most people haven't delved into, and by heavily relying on and drawing from it as a source, it's only going to make everything more impenetrable and dense for your audience, not necessarily make for a better story. I agree that it doesn't necessarily make for a better story, but I would also posit that it doesn't necessarily make for a worse story either. Perhaps less accessible to the general populace, but when I write this fan fiction, I'm not really writing it for the general populace. I don't begrudge anybody. If this is your first time reading Warhammer, or the first time reading Star Wars, or the first time doing both, I am honored that I could have written something that is worthy of an introduction to any of those things. That being said, when I sit down to write this, and I have my ideal audience in my mind, my ideal audience is an audience that typically already knows one or the other or both. And on the Star Wars side of things, my audience is typically somebody who is like me, a huge fan of the expanded universe. And you'll probably see the meme where Patrick is in a ring with SpongeBob, and SpongeBob is huge and muscular and ready to fight, and Patrick tears off his Patrick clothes, and underneath he's wearing a business suit, and then the caption says Star Wars canon, and then he tears off the business suit and is actually huge and muscular underneath it, and it says Star Wars expanded universe. A big part of the reason I use the expanded universe is because a lot of that irrelevant information helps to balance this out. All of those adventures that Han Solo had in the comics, to going to different places in the galaxy, encountering all those different races, alien races with all those different forms of technology and ways of fighting, the Killik, the swarm wars, all that stuff, the Siru. It's all important for me when doing this, because it shows me what Star Wars can do and how it can actually fight against the 40K universe, which is, of course, a heck of an enemy to pick a fight with, even when I nerf them, which I do admit that it's the whole Star Wars universe versus what is effectively a sector battle fleet and a bunch of civilians, a ton of civilians, don't get me wrong, whole planet's worth, but you see what I'm saying. I'm not stepping down from that claim that I have nerfed them a bit, but that's why I do use it, and that's why I posit that I'm not necessarily making a worse story by including it, though it is definitely a story for a certain kind of audience, and it is perhaps the case that you don't overlap with those qualities as much as other people in the audience might. I still hope that you enjoy the story. Honestly, I do, but I am telling a certain kind of story. So, moving on from that there. Also, I'd like to point out that using well-known, pre-existing, established, and popular, quote-unquote famous, characters is only one aspect of your story, one side, and making up entirely new characters for the others is objectively going to lead to a sense of narrative imbalance and a certain lack of symmetry, so to speak. That's not a subjective personal opinion. That is what you've done with the story, and that's kind of an inevitable consequence of that choice. So I don't necessarily disagree with at least a certain strength of that statement. I do agree that I've done that to a degree, but I would also say this. Star Wars runs a lot on the strength of its personalities and its characters and less on its universe. Whereas Warhammer 40K runs much more strongly on the sense of its setting and the things that you can do inside of it. Individual heroes and people, aside from the Emperor and people like that, are much less important in Star Wars 40K, which is why you can tell so many generational stories and why you have the issue of characters dying out. Where in Star Wars, it's revolutionary just that Luke Skywalker died. And it is. So I can't really separate Star Wars from those characters without truly neutering Star Wars. It is not that interesting to hear about nobody Jedi and nobody clones and nobody anythings. You want to know what Star Wars characters are thinking about if they're involved in any way or can be. There is a certain aspect of that with Warhammer 40K, with the Emperor, with the Chaos Gods, even with like things like Abaddon, and of course with the Primarchs. But I can't include a lot of them because their power scale and power level is simply too massive. Not all of them, and you will see what does get included, but a lot of them, and you do really have to admit that. And I say that as a Star Wars fan who loves Star Wars and a 40K fan who loves 40K. If I dropped a single Primarch in here, the war would be over pretty freaking quickly. So I think that while there is an element of truth to what you just said, it is mitigated by the different natures of these two universes. So moving on from that. In a certain respect, this would always be a problem you have to face, as 40K characters haven't, and let's be honest, will never be as famous, popular, or as well known as Star Wars characters. But by completely disregarding and leaving them out, what only emphasizes and exacerbates the imbalance and lack of symmetry. This is the thing about crossovers and such. A major obstacle or problem that often arises regardless of the IP involved. And yeah, again, I think that you're definitely right to a certain degree. But I'll say this and reemphasize this: don't underestimate the homebrew and the things that I make up here, because for me, Warhammer 40K is much more than any character or faction. It is like a whole setting, and that's what I'm bringing to this. So moving on from that, in my opinion, you're doing a great job of representing Star Wars characters and delivering for that side of the story and fan base. They feel true to form and on point. You're doing them justice. But what about the 40K fans such as myself? Can you honestly say you're doing 40K the same justice? I think I am. I think that when you hear Warhammer 40K characters, even if they're not major characters from the existing lore, that they are characters that are acting in a way that is consistent with that universe, that is dramatic and engaging, and has character and poignancy and can pull you along. I do put a lot of effort in that, and I do try. And I certainly do hope that I am doing the same justice. To be brutally honest, and not intending to be rude or insulting here, but if this was just a pure Star Wars fan fiction, I wouldn't have been as interested and probably wouldn't have clicked on the first video, never mind all of them. Do you see what I'm saying here? I'm primarily here for the grimdark of 40K clashing and interacting with the Star Wars universe. And I'm not getting enough 40K or Clash, just Star Wars stuff, too much. I'm sorry about that. That's not my intention. You're obligated to represent, balance, and serve. I'm not let's be clear about something. Like, just to be clear, I'm not obligated to do anything. I'm not being paid to do any of this. I'm actually spending a lot of my own money to do this. You know, if I wanted to just sit here and record my dick flapping back and forth and put that on YouTube, until somebody figures out that's what they're hearing and flags me for it, then that's all I'm obligated to do. You know, like, let's just be really clear and brutally honest about what my obligations are. Okay, don't get entitled over here. I'm making this 90% for myself, and that's 90% where my obligations lie. If it were different, I'd have put up a Patreon, and I probably will at some point, but more when I start putting up my own personal things or other things outside of the Star Wars versus Warhammer 40K. That exists for a very independent reason, and I think that my actions back up that statement. But in any case, you know, like, again, let's not get twisted about who's obligated to do what over here. But you can't really do that if one side is playing with more key pieces, is holding more high-value cards, has more well-known and established players, and gets more turns. The game is rigged. Star Wars has more POV perspectives, gets more screen time, etc., and has the benefit of mass audience familiarity. People intrinsically and instinctively care more about old established characters that are already that they already know, and they will intrinsically and instinctively care less about new ones they've just been introduced to because they aren't and probably never will be as invested. I don't appreciate that. Never will be as invested. I hope that you guys can get as invested in my characters. I would be honored if you could, and I do strive for it. I don't think it's impossible. Or so tremendously unlikely as long as the right pieces are there. I don't think that it's like rolling a roulette or that it's random. I also don't think that I give... who knows? I have to measure this out. It isn't my intention to give the Star Wars side a lot more screen time. I will say that I try to give Star Wars screen time when things are happening that are really terrifying. Like if you do find that Star Wars has more screen time than 40K, this is what I mean to say. If you do find that, it's because there's a lot more spectacle in a character from Star Wars encountering and experiencing something from the Warhammer 40K universe than it is in the inverse. There are exceptions and matches to the rule, but on the whole, almost everything about the Warhammer 40K universe is shocking and remarkable to the Star Wars universe characters. But for the Warhammer 40K characters, it's like, okay, droids and Jedi Force users are kind of open, a little bit too open. But is it anything crazier than the Eldar? Is it anything crazier than the Necrons? It's not really. You see what I'm saying? So that would be the reason that you see a lot more of that, and that's actually played more for Warhammer 40K than it is for Star Wars, and that's played for the reactions. And that would be the only reason, but it isn't my intention to balance, or rather, not balance, to overbalance one side over the other, to put more in one side over the other. There are definitely, the things that we talked about with characters, but I don't think that that will ultimately handicap as much. And, Star Wars has the home field advantage. We're changing the Star Wars galaxy. We're not changing the Warhammer 40K galaxy. Now, as things go along, I hope that you will become invested in the characters that I make and put into this and take them as serious as you would for any other narrative. That's up to the value you put into the characters that you read and how much that matters, that a character isn't canonical. That's a value judgment that only a person can make, person for person. But I will do what I can to provide as much value as I can for the characters that I make. So moving on from that. When someone like me who is naturally predisposed and biased to the 40K part of the story, if I'm finding it hard to care or just doesn't give a shit and it's gravitating towards the established Star Wars characters instead because there's actually something there and there's nothing really established on the other side, well, that's a problem with the storytelling, in my opinion. If you're gravitating toward the established Star Wars characters instead, that just means that that half of the story is being done really well. If you're being driven away from the Warhammer side, like the characters that I'm making there, that's all you're saying is that I'm doing the Star Wars side really well. I guess you want me to do the Warhammer side really well as well, and I think that I am. My question is, okay, what is your opinion of 1313 and Lazarus that you just read just now? What is your opinion of Nerva and the guardsmen that are storming the bay? What is your opinion of Safran? And of course, you have Orion and the others who are not necessarily directly involved, but what was your opinion of them back when they were taking center stage and it was all about them? For a little while, there were absolutely no Star Wars characters with any main names at all involved in the story, and it was just their encounter, the encounter of so-called Star Wars nobodies encountering my Warhammer 40K nobodies. What did you feel about things that were happening then? I think that, with all due respect, you and the many who may share an opinion like you may be allowing your bias that you can already acknowledge and feel to at least a degree to run away with you and to run away with your opinion. I would ask in this case that either you re-examine that bias or that you just give me time and let me finish the first season so that you can have a rounded out opinion of things that are happening. I don't agree with a lot of the things that you posit as true or as having to happen. I don't think that, that a lot of that's just it. I just don't think that a lot of things that you've said are actually things that you can posit as being objective or true. Some of them are opinions, but some of them are also just unfair denigrations that are a result of you not caring so much about one side versus the other. And while you do acknowledge that you have a bias in general, you don't acknowledge that those opinions are a result or a direct product of that bias. And to call them or phrase them as a critique isn't really very fair. I'll go up and I'll remind you that your initial response to me when I told you, well, I will suppose that we will just have to agree to disagree was, oh, right. Sorry, dude. I thought you wanted actual constructive criticism so that you might improve your craft. Never mind. I do want that, but I don't think that you are fairly, and respectfully as I can, saying, I don't think that's what you're supplying to me. You're supplying to me a very opinionated piece. And while I respect your opinions and you are allowed to have them and voice them, it isn't logical or fair to say that what you're doing is giving me actual constructive criticism so that I might improve my craft. Those are two different things you're doing. You might even be mingling them and mixing them together in the same post, but doing that doesn't give you right to call one the other. And I do believe that you're conflating those things. And honestly, it's a much more lethal conflation than me conflating the warp with the force, because when you throw those opinions together and I start to read your comments under the guise of it being a proper critique, it comes off as being pretty insulting. It comes off as being a lot of vulgarity and hard words over things that I either can't control, can't do anything about, or are the result of an opinion, not a value judgment. And that's why I have, that's why I said my initial short comment, and that's the point for point on your shameless critique. And I say that because, of course, your name is that. So there we go. Having responded to all that, hopefully I've lanced that, and no one else will feel any need to get in there. Please, no harassment from any side and any direction. It should go without saying. I know that it doesn't go without saying, so I'm saying it right now. Leave people alone. Let people have their opinions. Let people say what they want. We live in a free society. It is not illegal to hurt people's feelings, so leave it alone. In any case, moving on from that, let me do at least a few Q&As before I round this out. Actually, how long have I been going here? Jeez, I've been going for so long. Alright, I'm going to do... Wow, I did not realize that I had been going for that long. Holy crap. Okay, let me see here. Alright, let me just do at least one Q&A, right? That can't hurt. No one ever got hurt from one. So, let me go over here, down here, over here. And I'll go here and look for the first Q&A that I see. Okay. Volotex. Q&A. 1. Will you give us a galactic scale overview of everything that has happened so far at some point? Maybe. Maybe. We will see. 2. Are the Qualls Infinity Gates and earliest examples of Webway and Star Wars? Ooh, of the Webway and Star Wars. Look at you, bro. I like you. Volotex. Alright, dude. Alright, I'm not sure what the inside of the Qualls Infinity Gates look like. I've seen, the web of energy that seems to come out of their gates, but I'm not sure if that's what they look like on the inside. They probably are. And if you're not super acquainted with the expanded universe of Star Wars, just look up Star Wars Infinity Gates. This is the stuff that some dudes had before hyperdrive became a thing. And it's pretty wild, and yeah, it's like a very, very close allegory to Webway Gates. But yeah, nice stuff on there. So let's go on to the next one. Let's see here. Condor's DCS Q&A. Could you include a date counter in your vid? It's getting hard to understand how much time has passed in your vids. For example, how much time has passed since the expeditionary fleet has arrived in the Star Wars universe? I will consider doing this. Thank you for bringing this up. Let's keep going. Lord Marshal Valdar. This is the, let's see, Q&A. 1. When the ruinous powers of chaos show up, what Chaos Warbands or legions are going to be there? You have to wait to see that. If that happens, we'll see. 2. Since Ahsoka knows, or at least has some knowledge of the Imperium's history, is she at some point going to travel to the Milky Way galaxy to see if she can find more information on the Imperium and the enemies they face? It'd be interesting when she interacts with people like Yvrain, Commander Farsight. No, I don't currently have... Wow, that's a very interesting idea of bringing people... No. I have no plans for this universe, for this telling thus far, to bring anyone from Star Wars over to the Warhammer 40K universe. They might even stand a chance if they knew the pool they were about to jump into. But, you know, we'll see. But as of now, no plan for that. Let's see here. Ricky4990 Q&A. In this Q&A session, you answered what might happen if the Jedi and the Sith found out about the Emperor, but you forgot to answer how they would react and found out about the Chaos Gods. Ooh, fuck me. Okay, it's like been over an hour. All right. You're going to have to ask me about this. All right. Put this in a Q&A here under this video, and if I see it next time or put this up, I'll have to cover this next time because I will go on and on forever on this. You know how I am, so I won't be able to get into this one. But moving on to the next one. All right, Matt Murray, Q&A. How do you think your voice will hold up when you have to voice a fight between General Grievous and an Orc war boss? Emperor be with my vocal cords. Let them sing the truth of the Imperium's might. I don't know, man. I hope it. I hope I don't have to go through any voice loss again. Otherwise, oh fuck, man, that was a pretty trippy experience. Hopefully they'll hold up pretty good, Emperor willing. So, with that, I think I'll wrap up the Q&As for this time. Sorry that I had to go short on that. I had to, I went through that whole critique. Hopefully that pays out, and it's a good thing that I went through that and took that seriously, because I do plan to ignore anyone else who brings up points that are quite in that direction, just because, like I said, not much I can say about a lot of those points, and I already went into that, so I'm not going into it again. In any case, big news. All right, so I'm gonna do one more video that is going to be like a weekly video run. It'll be the next one. It might take me, again, it might take 2 weeks to get it out. I actually had family over. My mom was visiting me, which I don't get too often, which I love. So I was spending time with her, and then I had a visit from a friend who lives kind of far away. And that was also pretty awesome, so I spent some time with him. So that was the things that kind of had me... that and other little things, but those compounded together to make it so that I couldn't quite release on a week-long schedule. Maybe I will be able to do it this week. Maybe I won't. We'll see. I'm trying to make the videos kind of girthy, you may have noticed. But the next video will be the last video for a while, and then what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to sit down, write down every single video leading out to the very, very end in extreme detail, voice them all out, get them all done, get them all ready, and when they're all done and all ready, I'm going to release them all one after the other and finish it all off in a big bang. One continuous literal run that will only begin when the last video is finished, because we're close enough now that I feel I can do that. And with that, I will close out Season 1 of Star Wars versus Warhammer 40K. So, that should be pretty exciting. Also, when I close that out, I will also have, hopefully, not just updates, but actual original stuff for you guys to look at. Because, doing this story and being here for this, being able to voice this and seeing the reception to it kind of gives me faith that if I made something of my own, there may be an audience for it, that people may very well want to read what I have to write and see what I have to make. So I took some of my savings and my money, and I've been putting together a few creative products of my own that are entirely original to me. And at the end of Star Wars Season 1, when I can finally put this part of the project down and complete this commitment that I made, I will, in that last video, be revealing to you guys this original work. And hopefully you guys will enjoy it and participate with me and come with me on that journey as well, as you did with this one. And of course, as we go ahead and do that and as I move forward, I will be writing out the scripts and preparing the plans and incorporating the lessons so that I can start Season 2 off at a run. And that's the big news. So, in any case, guys, with that being said, I'll go ahead and put it down. Have fun. Make time for fun. Make time for the people around you. And I'll see you next time.